So for the last 3 months, we have been talking about practicing with the Brahma Vihara of metta, loving kindness. Okay, so here we go. Moving on. Karuna. Out of the rich soil of metta blossoms karuna, the Pali word for compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to make others happy, practice compassion. And those are the words of the Dalai Lama. Love of metta is the enduring wish that others be happy, deeply well, and that they possess the inmost causes of happiness. The love of karuna is the enduring wish for beings to be free from suffering and its inmost causes. Compassion has been described as the heart quivering in response to the suffering of another. I think that compassion is probably the greatest gift we ever receive. It is probably the greatest gift we can offer, whether we are offering it to others or to ourselves. Let's not forget ourselves here. And we are born with an innate capacity to experience deep compassion. But often it can be difficult for us to access this. What makes it difficult for us to touch into this capacity? All of us have been hurt in some way, have been harmed in some way, or life experiences have eroded our trust that people will be trustworthy. And often we're not completely trustworthy. Our hearts have been hurt. We've talked a lot about this over the last few months. And they have responded by withdrawing, isolating, turning tough. And this becomes part of our self story. Life also sends us waves of distractions rolling over us. And sometimes in that, compassion may seem less important. As metta, compassion takes us beyond the confines of our self story that are so frequently, these stories are so frequently marked by our personal preoccupations, our anxieties, our worries. And compassion helps us to see our story in the story of all others, in the stories and lives of others. It is not a state or an emotion. It's an understanding that really allows us to go beyond the I, me, and mine and dualistic thinking. Penetrates right in there. Well, everybody, there is a lot to say about compassion, and we will be taking and talking about compassion for the next 3 months. This is a kind of a brief introduction. I want to talk about receiving compassion today. Why begin with the receiving of compassion? Well, we in the West have often learned that to be good, to be a kind person, we need to consider others first. And we often can feel guilty if we're self-centered or selfish. It's a limiting mindset here in the West. John McCransky from Awakening Through Love writes, one of the reasons that we have difficulty finding an enduring love to help others is that often others bother us. And this is related to a brittle sense of self. What bothers us about others, what we dislike or fear in them, are aspects of ourselves that are reflected back, and we don't like it. Until we make deep peace with such aspects of ourselves by learning to receive a love, compassion, that touches in past them to the intrinsic goodness of our being, until we can learn to do that, we can't open fully to the intrinsic goodness of others, beyond behaviors and beyond our stories. When we receive this kind of love, we can in turn offer a love that embraces others, just like me, with similar flaws, and touches into their intrinsic goodness and mirrors their goodness back to them. I've read a poem entitled "At the Corner Store" that so powerfully demonstrates the importance of receiving. And I'm just going to read a few lines from this by Alison Luterman. The old man behind the counter returned my change, beaming, as if I were the bright new buds on the just bursting open cherry trees, as if I were everything beautiful, struggling to grow. This old man who didn't speak English beamed out love to me in the iron week after my mother's death, so that when I emerged from his store, my whole cockeyed life, the glorious failure, glowed gold like sunset after the rain. To receive a simple wish of love opens our hearts to an intrinsic goodness that is here for us. Suddenly, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. There is a sense of mystery and awe, spaciousness. So how do we help our hearts to open, to receive compassion? Refuge. One of the things we do is set up a practice of refuge. Our holding environment can be viewed as a place of refuge. Here we are, each of us, breathing, hearts beating. Whatever is going on in our lives, we are making this deliberate commitment to be here. We weave together a safe environment to practice, to settle, to come into our bodies and to open our hearts and feel for stability and grounding. Refuge, where we deliberately cultivate a deep unwinding so that we can access a calm and deepening sense of refuge in our own experience and in our own bodies. Often we introduce in the guided practice of these daily sits the benefactor as a beneficial presence or a wise elder. What is important in refuge, so important, is that we have a sense of safety. We feel that sense of safety when we are in the presence of someone who has our best interest at heart. And there are many, many skillful and beautiful rituals and practice in Buddhism that help to invoke this experience of receiving. We owe a lot to the East. Eastern teachers understood the importance of receiving compassion so that we can deepen compassion and offer. You may not know this, the benefactor practice is actually based on traditional Buddhist devotional practices. The most common is taking refuge. And it includes visualizing or sensing the presence of others, caring folks, spiritual folks, or just a field of them in whom one can place trust, receive inspiration and unconditional love and guidance. It's also inspired by a practice called deity yoga. And in this case, the caring figure is an archetype, like the Buddha of compassion, or Tara, or Kuan Yin, symbolic figures, a rabbi, a prophet, Jesus, Mary. It doesn't matter. What matters is the experience. It is not about the benefactor. It is about opening to the qualities of love, acceptance, and compassion that are within us. As we have been seen, so can we see. And as we have been held, so can we hold. And I love this thought. We are drawn to others who embody qualities that we want. And the part of us that sees that in another recognizes that this is also within us, yet we don't fully trust it. It hasn't yet fully blossomed. We are learning how to create a secure base and trust in our capacity to offer. If we're going to turn toward that which is difficult, we want to feel secure. We want to learn to trust that. The first time I did the benefactor practice, my grandmother showed up as my benefactor. And I used to sleep over at her house, and I would eat graham crackers and milk, and we would watch TV shows, and I would get in front of the bed and I would dance to the different theme songs of the TV shows. I don't know if any of you remember Perry Mason. I may be kind of dating myself, but you know, that theme song, and she would just light up, and I lit up, and that was my first experience of really allowing myself to inhabit a benefactor moment. And I was sort of like a fat rat going back for more. I wanted to keep feeling that feeling. And I have appreciated that this is sort of a reconditioning. That's a reconditioning. So that I could begin to start feeling, oh, that feeling. Yeah, that. I work with a lot of people who have experienced a lot of trauma. And I will often ask them at some point, was there anyone that you went to, that you felt safe with, that listened to you, whether it was an uncle, an aunt, a distant relative, a teacher, someone? And usually they will find someone. And if not, I will ask them, I want you to be on the lookout for this. I want you to watch this between people. Pay attention to moments of kindness and moments of care, because those moments, those threads are vital. They are vital. They are life affirming. And I had one woman who said, no, there was no one that I trusted. And so the question was there anyone you mistrusted the least? And that's where we start. So here's a thought as we end. Think of someone who just delights you to think about, or who took delight in you just because you are who you are. And if you can't think of anyone, don't worry about it. I promise you, it will come. How might they introduce you to their friends? What is your relationship with receiving compassion? What does it mean to you to receive compassion? What part of you needs a little more compassion? What keeps you from receiving compassion? And what supports you in receiving compassion? Thank you for listening.